That's what happens when you have loose papers on the go. You kind of stop figuring out where you are. Now, certainly with the amount of chatter that I've had and some of my actual relatives actually sitting in the crowd, as I better make sure that I get most of my facts straight here. But yeah, with the name of Ron McMillan, you think, okay, I got, that's a fair bit of Scottish heritage. And indeed it is, because my grandmother was one of the Rosses that originally came to the Beaverton area in first in about 1834. But when you combine the two of my families together, well, I have 61% Scottish heritage according to Ancestry DNA. So that's a pretty fair scale. The rest of it comes from my mother. It has to come from my mother's family, who grew up around Uxbridge. So it's tons more. For those of you who remember, here's two pictures, and you can come up front afterwards to see them. My grandparents, around the date that they were married in 1918. And then this picture, these two pictures were from their golden, or what do you call it, 60th year? Diamond wedding anniversary. And I remember both of them. That was in July 30th, 1978. So at least I got my dates right in that one. And I could talk a little bit about my McMillan side, but to be honest, I never had a jump start to the McMillans. It was the Ross clan that I got the jump start, and when in 1979, a group of the ladies, no, pardon me, Charlie Ross was in this group too. They put this family catalog together for the Ross clan. Some of them were from fair ways away. Mary Bradshaw, Evelyn Moore, Lily Freshwater, and there's Charlie Ross. Where does he come into? That's right. Yeah, so many of them. There's over 1,400 names I have in my Ross clan history right now, and I just found out I got two more I'm going to have to put in right off the bat, because Arlene just told me about that. But Donna Ross, Dorothy Gemmell, Mamie Ross, Ruth Ross, Dorothy Davidson, and Mary Thompson. So this was from 1979. So that basically got me going as a kickstart to try to put together the family of what was the Ross clan. And of course, there's a huge catalog of Rosses, and this is now my workbook. But I'm just going to pull it apart because I'm just going to give you some highlights of some of the branches. So we go back to, as I said, 1834, and there was a fellow by the name of Angus Ross, and it describes him as a yeoman in the Imperial Army. Now, does anybody know what a yeoman in the Imperial Army, what that means? Well, I tell you, I had to look it up. You have the common man who was a soldier in the army. So he's one of the common grunts, and as what they would call in those old days the cannon fodder. Yet you also had the gentleman warriors, which are likely the officers and stuff, such that led the battles. The yeomen were that rank in between, and in their otherwise life, they actually were landholders themselves. They actually owned smaller plots of land. They weren't the gentry, but they owned smaller plots of land. And Angus Ross was described as one of these yeomen in the Imperial Army. Well, as was the case in the 1820s, 30s, he qualified for a land grant in Canada to start to farm, and he was granted the north half of Lot 15, Concession 4 of Thorah Township. I thought I had a copy of printout, because I did actually see the land grant in the microfiche at the National Archives. Do you think I can find that now? I don't know where it is. But he got that land grant, and so he started to clear the land shortly thereafter. But he invited his nephew. It's very interesting. Angus Ross was born in 1801, but his nephew was born in 1791. Well, you know the size of the families that we had back then, so that's not really that uncommon. But he invited his nephew to come because his nephew had a family. His wife was Margaret Gunn, and he had 5 children: William, John, Alexander, Donald Gunn, and Marion. And so they came over, and in about 1836, they arrived in Thorah Township. Unfortunately, Angus didn't survive for very long, and he actually passed away, I think, in about 1837. So that left the property totally to George and Margaret Gunn and their 5 children. George Ross was one of the people who basically history tells us that they really supported the Presbyterian Church, often having church services right in their home. I believe the house is still there. It'll be on the west side of Lake Ridge Road, and it's the lower level comes out from behind, the upper level comes in from the highway side, and there's a big double fireplace in there, and that's where they would hold church services in the early days, until of course they built the stone church. And he apparently was one of the first ones to haul stone from the lakeshore over to the build site for the stone church. So but we're going to go on and actually talk about the family, because I said there were 5 children. William was the oldest, born in 1819, and just to clarify, all of the children were born in Scotland before they came over here, and in County Creech. That's how you pronounce it. That's how I pronounced it anyway. Which is in the northern part, right? It's actually in Sutherlandshire. If you know northern Scotland, this is a picture of northern Scotland, and this is Sutherlandshire here, and Ross-shire and Cromarty down here, and this is the Moray Firth in here. Aberdeen's way over here, Edinburgh and Glasgow are well down south. The whole family was born in that area, William being the oldest. Then there was John, who was born in 1821, and Alexander, that's my branch of the family, born in 1826. Donald Gunn was born in 1828. And then Marion was born, didn't put a tab in for her. Well, I'll find it because it was after that anyway, so, because I know that I've got that. Yeah. So they were all born prior to coming over. So Marion was probably quite a young girl. Probably less than 8 years old when she came over, so that must have been quite a horrendous ride for her. Just a little thing here. One of the cousins, Paul Freshwater, and I'm going to get into that part a little bit later too, because some of us knew Paul. Had written a story about George Ross, and it starts off that he felt an autumn chill off the North Atlantic as he wrapped his threadbare greatcoat tighter around him in the twilight at the Black Hulk riding easily by its Glasgow quay. On the morning tide, that ship would take him and his family forever away from that sorry land and for the lovely Shire of Sutherland on Scotland's rocky northeast coast, where his kinsmen had eked out a meager but tolerable existence since their Celtic, Norse, and Pictish blood had mingled during the forgotten ages. Yeah, so it was the original departure was from Cromarty, which is on the Dornoch Firth in that northern area. But I'm going to jump ahead into some of the other families, because certainly my own family descended from Alexander Ross. He was married to a Marianne Gillespie, so we have a connection in there with the Gillespie family. That he actually was the one who ended up, or his next generation ended up with the farm out on the north half, lot 15, concession 4, and it was stayed in the family right through to my great uncle Don. And they worked the farm there. Don was my grandmother's brother, and there was well, it went from Donald A to Donald Donald A to Donald C, but there were 8 in that children that Alexander Ross had. So when I had I don't know whether I'm sure Mac and Marilyn were there. When I printed out my pedigree chart, my family tree, we had an annual thing down at Lakeview Manor. It spanned 14 pages wide and 2 pages high, just so that I could figure it all out. So we had quite a large expanse of family. The other family that was very prominent in this area, of course, was the family of John Ross. That he was the son number 2 of the original settlers, and he was married to a Mary McDougall. It said the daughter of a John and Ellen McDougall, and they married in 1848. But their plan was that they actually, once he became old enough, he actually took land on lot 14, concession 1 of Thorah Township. And again, there's property that has stayed in the same family right through, and Alan, until his death last month, was still living on that property, was still there. And it's remained in the family. Again, there's a long chain of family members. Again, John Ross had another 8 children too. So it starts to spread out, and it's very hard on a lot of times to try to remember which branch and what chain. It's like a Plinko game. You have to go back and forth around. And especially if there was twins that married twins, or brother-sister that married a brother and sister that married another brother and sister, and you get a whole that crisscross in the families, and it just tangles the web of trying to keep everyone straight. But certainly, when we, these are the 2 branches of the family, though, that were probably the closest together as far as keeping in touch with each other. Thinking back about, and there's a picture up here where Clifford Ross and Don Ross are in the same picture because of a ribbon cutting, probably at the fairgrounds, that took place, when Don was quite a bit younger than what I remember. Unfortunately, these are the bits and pieces that I don't have the dates on. I know who they are. I don't know who the dignitary is in the middle of the picture, but it's quite a feat. But there was a lot of crossover between the families. We knew each other. the other part, Arlene's mother, actually his uncle Bob, and his son and I went to school together. And my dad, and Bob Ross, we'd go back and forth to do various things, whether they bought farm things from each other or whatever. But there was a connection that we had in that part. I have to say, though, one thing about the majority, not all, but the majority of the John Ross family still have a fair bit of local connection. But we do have, in particularly, one, and where am I? Lillian was your dad's sister. That's right. Okay, I got to make sure I get the generations. She married a fellow by the name of Freshwater. And their son, who unfortunately passed away, almost New Year's 2018, was it? Yeah. He had gone into business. He ended up in Cincinnati, Ohio, for the longest time, and was an executive with, I'm going to say Procter & Gamble, was it? Yeah, Procter & Gamble. And did quite well, and he ended up, he and his wife ended up in Eagle Harbor, Michigan. Does anyone know where Eagle Harbor, Michigan is? Of course you do. You were at the house. He drove there. A beautiful house. If anyone can imagine a map of Lake Superior, so you've got Duluth way down. I'm going to try to do this backwards for your benefit. You got Duluth way down here, Thunder Bay here, Sault Ste. Marie way over here. There's a little finger that sticks up in the bottom of a peninsula. That's called the Keweenaw Peninsula, and Eagle Harbor is right almost on the top edge of that. Not quite out at the point, but right at the top edge. And they have had a beautiful home. And Bobby still lives there. I think she still lives there. No. Oh, is she in a nursing home now? Oh, okay, I don't know that. But is Ross living in the house? Oh, okay. But he's up there all the time. Oh, okay. See, I've lost a little connection there. I still see Ross on Facebook a lot. But that's the kind. We have other branches of these other families too that were settled in places like Marquette, Michigan, which is also up on the south shore of Lake Superior, but all down through into Ohio and so on. There's a number of them. There's a bunch of pictures here that are from my branch of the Alexander Ross that moved to, because Alexander Ross actually eventually moved to Roland, Manitoba. I'm going to get back to that in a minute because there's quite a coincidence there. Or maybe it's not a coincidence. But a lot of his that part of the family ended up in southern Manitoba, farming, and they married into the Phillips family for one. There's a whole list of various families that they listed into, but that's where it spreads to. And even from there, they've spread right to the West Coast, whereas one married a Mackenzie, and they're buried in Victoria, BC. So they've gone right across the country. I have to say that the fact that so many pictures of tombstones are now available online, and you can look them up, your relatives. I've actually found several of them, not just in the Stone Church, Cedar Vale Cemetery, and not your mom and dad, but on the other side of my family, on the McMillan side. I've got some in there. So, but still the John Ross division of the tree and the Alexander Ross division of the tree, we've stayed connected quite a bit. I was particularly wanted to get to northern Michigan to see where Paul Freshwater was, and fortunately I got back there that was June of 2019 when they had the memorial service for him. It was a great memory to go back to. The other one that I do want to talk about is, like I said, the youngest one, which was, as soon as I can find it here. Oh, there we go. Was the youngest of the 5 children was Marion Ross. And she married into the Grant family from Cedarhurst Farms. Oh, there it is. It's like that far off the bottom of the page. No wonder I couldn't find it. And she was born in 1830. So when she came over, she was only 6 years old. Now that I've actually found the date, and she married Angus Grant Sr. in 1867. And here's where we run into one of those cases where you kind of lose part of the family because you can't find them, or when you do find them, you don't get any response when you make inquiries to them, because they had their family, and it goes right down that when I go through the various generations, there was a now I lost it. Macaulay Cant, and I'm trying to remember her first name. Anyway, the last name when she, yes, Corson Cant, and their son Paul lives in Sackville, New Brunswick. I've looked it up. I know that's where he lives or lived, because I tried to communicate with him and I couldn't get anything. But I don't know a whole lot. We don't have a whole lot of that family in between there. We got sort of the direct line down, but we don't, but if there were other, and sometimes you get one sibling off the line and it stops right there, so you have that difficulty. So unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot about that particular branch of the family. I'm sure that especially with their connection to the Cedarhurst Farms and down in that part off of the second, I think it was off the second concession that the main farm was. I'm sure there's a lot of history there that could be gleaned, but unfortunately, I don't have it. That brings me to, I'm going to go backtrack now to son number 1, because this is actually a kind of a really neat thing for me. The oldest son, William. I'll ask you. You've got a younger you've got a family, and you've got a lot of kids, and you've got a meager homestead that you're trying to work and keep everybody fed. What happens to the oldest one? Hit the road, buddy. It's time for you to hit the road. Unfortunately, I think that's partially what happened to this one. As I said, he was born. He's born 11 years. He's 11 years older than the youngest one. So he did stick around for a while, but he did marry. Margaret Murray, who was the daughter of a Neil Murray and a Mary Ann Murray. He married her in 1844. They had a family. Well, when it came, later on, he moved out, and that's where some of the information ended. Didn't know where they went until all of a sudden, and God bless Aunt Donna for keeping every little scrap of paper that she ever had. I found in her box, not much different than that box over there, a chart of the William Ross family, and it actually said where they were. They're in a little town called Bathgate, North Dakota, not 30 miles from Low Roland, Manitoba. except it's south of the border, south of the American border. Turned out that about in 1870 to 74, somewhere in that area, they moved to Bathgate Township in Pembina County, which is the very northeast corner of North Dakota. That's Pembina County, and they moved to the section, and they have a quarter section in that township, just southeast of the southeast of the little village of Bathgate itself. In the summer of 22, Barbara and I went to visit a friend of mine in Kenora, and we decided I'm going to take a 36-hour trip, and I drove from Kenora to Bathgate, North Dakota, actually to the next little community, which is the county seat. Starts with a C. I can't remember exactly the name either. But we found it. We found our relatives. We found them, and it turns out that same quarter section is still in the family name. It's still in the direct family name. It's now Brown. It turned out that William had a son, Hugh, and that's actually who registered the quarter section in Bathgate Township. And he had a son, Hugh, who was a bachelor. He had a sister, Catherine, who married a Brown, and that's the line now that still owns the quarter section. At one point, they owned 3/4 of the section of that township. But unfortunately, I didn't physically get to meet him, but I got to speak to him, and I have to follow up some more. His name's Kelly Brown, and he's the grandson of the Catherine Ross, where the connection is made there. So finally, I've actually got a little more of that branch of the family. So it's the detective work that finally filled in some of that gap, and it made the trip all worthwhile. Even though I didn't get to speak to him, however, we had some great help at their county museum. They had a whole bunch of county atlases, and you could pull up each township from about 18. I think we started back at about 1875 or 1880, and went about every 10 years and saw how the progression of the property went from, like I said, just that northeast quarter of the section till they owned that and the southwest quarter of the section, and then part of the southeast quarter of the section, and then it reverted back and back and forth. And when a brother and sister were actually owned it, and they split it because they didn't. Well, she said they didn't get along probably, but it moved back and forth. So that was part of that. So fortunately, yeah, for that we were very fortunate and able to find that part of the family from that kind of detective work. And stomping through cemeteries. Fortunately, yeah, the cemetery for the little village of Bathgate is only a mile off of the main road, right onto one of the little side roads. And you go down there, and sure enough, you drive by, and the first tombstone you says Ross right across it. So we knew we were in the right place, and sure enough, once we went back and we actually found refreshed our minds and remembered what some of the other names were that we were looking for. Then we could still see. We found quite a number of the other parts of the family as well. The last part of the family that I want about, though, is the Donald Gunn Ross family, which is the part of the family that went to Central Michigan. First, this Donald Gunn Ross and his oldest son. There's poetry in here, so I've got to get past the poetry. Yeah. and his old there's George Fraser Ross. And well, they had George, Alexander, William, Hannah, Ronald, Donald, and Rebecca. Only three of them had family that carried on. George actually went to live in St. Louis, Missouri. So he didn't stay around, but Ronald and Donald did, and together with their father, in about in the mid 1880s, founded the Ross Lumber Company. As I said, they started first in Clare County, which is just almost, if you go to the Lower Peninsula, it's almost dead center, pretty close to dead center in the peninsula. But then they moved back to Gladwin County, which is just the next county east, and they set up a lumber mill at the confluence of the Cedar and the Tobacco Rivers. And that place where they set up the mill is where Beaverton, Michigan is situated. It wasn't originally supposed to be Beaverton, Michigan. Apparently, from some stories that they had that I learned when I was there in 2003, that they had proposed names like Grand Forks. Grand Forks, North Dakota had already been established, so that probably wasn't a good one. Apparently they had another one, and they couldn't come up with another name, so I don't know whether one of the Rosses, it's supposition, but perhaps one of the Rosses just says, well, let's call it Beaverton, naming it after this town. So that's all I can sort of say for that. And basically that's where it came from. As I said, Ronald and Donald, the two oldest sons, they were the ones that founded the town, and or the business, and the town grew up around it. I was there. I've been there several times. Beaverton was, it actually sits the main street of. It's like Woodville. Everybody knows how Woodville was in the old time. Only the road runs east-west. The south half, that's in Eldon Township. The north, or in Mariposa Township. The north half is in Eldon Township. Well, swing that around north-south. There, they were split down the middle between two townships. And I guess back in the late 1800s, they had a real problem. So they had to move on to become independent. And it was in 1903 they actually declared, or were granted, they became the city of Beaverton. It almost sounds funny when we're saying that. You know what? It's no bigger than this town, but they still call it the city of Beaverton. So this is why when I hold up a plate that says Beaverton Centennial 1903, it's not Beaverton, Ontario. This is when they actually, and I was really quite fortunate because the cousin that lived down there, Nancy Macklem, she was the last Ross that was born there. Her father Walter. This is Don and Walter at a Lions Club convention. They knew of each other, but apparently this was the first time they had ever met. The first of many, many times, because after this meeting, Walter and his wife Virginia would come to Beaverton and visit with all the Rosses they could. I know they often came to my grandparents' house. They went to Donna and Donna Ross's place. They probably went down to see your dad, Marilyn, down to see Clifford and family down there. So and maybe others too. I don't know, but I was pretty young when they first started coming. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Which would just kick. Yeah. So that's the. Oh yeah. Actually, so did my parents. They went to visit. They went to visit them on their circle down around and through the states. They went to visit them because I know that my cousin Nancy spoke of that quite often. So unfortunately now in Beaverton, Michigan, there are no more Rosses there because Nancy has moved to a little bigger center with a little more facilities and stuff. Beaverton, Michigan, as I said, it's in the center part of the state. It's not very big. It doesn't have its own hospital. The closest hospital is up in Gladwin to the north, but it's probably not much better than I was going to say Minden Hospital, but Minden's emergency just is closing. Halliburton Hospital, so it's not that substantial, but that's the. So the Ross clan that came here back, as I said, back in the mid 1830s, has really, like so many other ones, has blossomed to a huge extent. I don't know how many went farther back east again. Maybe just Mac's son. You still have one out in the East Coast there, Mac? Oh, you see, he's going side to side here. We don't know so much about any. I don't know anyway, other than some of the younger generations now that have spread out. But that's the way of the world. Certainly, the Rosses I haven't had a chance to go back further. I'd have to actually buy a world subscription to Ancestry.ca to actually go back and check out some of the farther ones back. It's enough for me to try to keep track of the new generations coming up and to try to fill in the blanks as I go. But it gets better and better as the more people that are on these genealogical sites. There are more information that you can find, providing you can match them up. You have to be very cautious about that. If I don't get at least probably 5 or 6 points of match, I don't consider it it's a maybe on it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't a match for my tree, but I don't go on it. But that's the sort of the extent of the Ross family. Fortunately, we still do have a few within our midst. One in particular, right here in this room, that still has the family name Ross. We're glad of that, but we're glad of all of the members of our family that have contributed as much as they have been able to our community, and I thank you for this opportunity to make this presentation to you today. I think my time's run out. Yeah.
Is there any documentation of we have to assume that family originally arrived here, like a sail ship in America? Would we assume that they arrived into this area, whether it's land grants or whatever properties they had through the Lake Simcoe system, or is there any documentation?
There isn't any documentation. The problem with and I've tried to look up. If you try to look up passenger manifests pre-60, they don't list the names, and especially of the lower class. Some of the ships they come over may not have had any class. They were just throw them in the hold and hope they survive. But certainly anything that had a distinction between classes, they probably didn't list the third class people until I think there had to have been something, regulations or something in the 1860s that they finally started to list all passengers that came over. So that came up in one of my research articles that I read, and where they were talking about searching manifests. some of the, I think it started a little earlier than that. If they sailed into perhaps New York, they had manifests before that. But if they came into Halifax, Montreal, or even right up through the well, as far as they could at that time, and up to the St. Lawrence, that they didn't have names. No, and that's also that it works against you in reverse, because if you're trying to find a place of ship that they came over, so you can find out where it came from. There's no connection. You can't find that connection. So it's a roadblock. Whether there is other documentation in the old country, in Scotland itself, where someone has bought passage, it may not say exactly where they departed, only that they left the country. So, well, like I said, I haven't got over there yet, and there's enough other stuff. Okay. Anything else?
You mentioned
Yeah.
the name Gunn.
Yeah.
Now, is that any connection to this? I missed that meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, certainly the Guns have a lot of same
Yeah.
area in Scotland, so it may have been.
It's the Margaret Gunn, the wife of George Ross, is the only Gunn that is in the family here. So what? And I have no listing currently of any of that family from before they came over. Certainly, if I went back farther, if I could get back into the earlier 1800s and into the 1700s, I might find a connection. But honestly, I don't know. I'm not aware of anything. But it's. Mm-hmm. Perhaps, yeah.
You get big families that all had the same names.
Or they reused their names. I can think of it just right off the top of my head, probably 3 examples, although I'd have to search to find them. 3 examples where they've had a child die young, and then 1 or 2 children later, they give them the same name. So it makes it confusing to try to keep them straight. Unfortunately, trying to rationalize when you've got 2, and then if somebody else wasn't aware of that and they've done some work, and it ended up it's not going to jive with the work that I've put together from what I've more local information sources, such as my grandmother and Arlene's mother, all of those. So that we kind of have to. I'm not going to say pick and choose, but we just have to be very cautious about what information we validate or not. Anything else? Mm-hmm.
Said one thing, had race.
Yeah, well, once the Rosses got over that ridge and headed for but they had to cross the river too. So you'd want to make sure they'd had a ford to cross the river that was shallow enough. Yeah. But yeah, I know that would have been it was a big thing, I'm sure, back in what was that, about 1840, 1842 that they were building the church. Yeah. So it was it was a big thing, and a big undertaking for all of the community to get that church built. Mm. I don't know. I've been down that river quite a few times in a canoe, but I never looked for a ford. And Bob's shaking his head too. He can remember lots of those trips. Oh. Oh, there's a GM man if I heard one. Well, thank you.
I first met Ron back